I believe this was an attack not just on the United States, but on the civilized world. The World Trade Center is a symbol of commerce and intercourse between nations. You're going to find Japanese and Chinese and Italians and Europeans and Latin Americans, people from all over the world who are going to be in that building today who are going to be killed by these terrorists.
Indeed, but it is also a telling symbol, these buildings, the Pentagon as well, of American military and financial might. Couldn't have been a greater humiliation for the United States.
Well, you know, the United States during World War II, there was a famous line that they've woken a sleeping giant. I think people in Europe have understandably questioned the willingness of the United States to act abroad, to lose lives in battles, to send their troops into Macedonia or Kosovo. What they're going to find is the American people are going to respond to this, and they're going to be very, very, very angry, and they're going to try, when they can identify who's responsible, to make sure they pay a price.
That's interesting, because that's the other telling parallel with Pearl Harbor, the parallel that everybody's talking about today. It's not just the surprise, the shock, the sense of vulnerability on America's own soil. It's this sense that, you know, the world's problems are our problems. We can't just avoid them.
Exactly, and I think the reason why I keep focusing on the World Trade Center, number one, is because that's where the bulk of the damage and the terrible destruction is, because that's a symbol of the entire world. It's not just the Pentagon, it's not just the United States. The World Trade Center in New York is the financial and industrial capital of the planet, and this was an attack on all of our societies by these cowardly terrorists.
And James, just one very brief final one to finish. The anger is not just going to be focused abroad, is it, or whoever perpetrated the act. It's a question of intelligence failure, isn't it? We've seen already some congressmen saying today this is a day of disgrace for America's intelligence services.
Well, I don't have access to intelligence the way I used to, and but having worked in the government, I know this may not be very popular. I'm not really that big on the blame game. I think there's been a policy failure of all the major nations of the world, including the United States, in not realizing that this danger that we faced from terrorist cells is one that required extraordinary determination, resources, and spending. Because ultimately, if you have cowardly people who are willing to send suicide bombers in to kill innocents, no matter how much money you spend or no matter how good your intelligence is, there's a limit to what you can do.
James, there we have to leave it. Many thanks.
Well, we're hearing that people are still being rescued from ruined buildings in New York. Here's the experience of some of the people caught up in the attacks. I'm not sure. We got that report, but it may take a little while to come in. Let's go across now to the United States again, because as we've been saying, today's events have been described as the worst attacks on American soil since Pearl Harbor. How will the American people react to all this? What effect will it have on them? Joining me now from our studios in Washington is Professor Robert Lieber of Georgetown University. Professor Lieber, James Rubin there was talking about the obvious anger that many Americans will feel. Do you think that is going to be in essence, the sense that most people will have tonight?
Yes, I do, and I think there's something unique and very different about this terrorist wave of assaults. There have been other terrorist attacks in recent years that produce immediate anger, but then that fades. This is different. Nothing like this has occurred on American soil, at least for the continental U.S., in American history. It is no exaggeration to call it a terrorist Pearl Harbor. And I think the impact of shock on the American public today is comparable in some ways to 1963 when President Kennedy was assassinated.
Now, as you were speaking there, Professor Lieber, we're taking some new pictures coming to us from the streets of New York, which are showing, well, they're very, very extremely distressing scenes. They're showing some of the injured being put into ambulances. We have seen scenes which look like the devastation caused in World War II. Terrible scenes from this most sophisticated of all world cities. What do you think, as these pictures go round America tonight and as people begin to think about this, it settles in, as you said, with the assassination of President Kennedy, what will they be demanding from their political leaders?
Well, I think you will see a sense of both anger and determination. Over the decades, America's adversaries have consistently underestimated the purpose and resolve of the United States. but I think you've found historically that when the United States has found its most vital interests threatened or have been attacked, the country has responded with remarkable resolve. Sometimes our politics are not very pretty or high level, but on an occasion like this, I think you're going to find that the President, the Congress, and the American people will find ways to support decisive action on a long-term basis in responding to this act of war.
Professor Lieber, many parallels have been made with Pearl Harbor through the day, this terrible surprise attack that nobody was expecting. Of course, the difference is we knew who did it in Pearl Harbor. We don't know who the enemy is. How much more difficult is that to come to terms with?
Well, it's risky to speculate in the middle of events. One thing I think is not unreasonable to say, though, is that an action of this sort would have required a very extensive terrorist network and support, almost certainly by a state, not just a bunch of bearded guys with Kalashnikovs, to hijack at least 4 planes at the same time, to have terrorists, pilots who could fly large passenger aircraft, to coordinate actions in New York and Washington, to resolve on the timing, to keep it secret, to have concealed identities and whatnot. This is not a small operation. There is bound to be, almost certainly, the hand of a country behind this. And I think sooner or later the details will emerge. When they do, I don't think you're going to find something like an antiseptic strike with Tomahawk missiles, but something much more sustained, intense, and long-term.
Mr. Lieber, again, as you're talking, news is continuing to come in, as you can imagine. We're now being told that yet another enormous building in New York has collapsed. It is the 47-story Salomon Brothers building, which was situated very close to the World Trade Center, right there in this financial capital. Professor Lieber, the implications of what you are saying is that this will absolutely be seen as an act of war by the ordinary people of the United States. Never mind the fact the military is on alert, ordinary folk will feel this is an act of war.
Absolutely. I mean, I think in terms of coherent policy, during the last decade, the United States has not had any kind of overarching sense of threat of the sort that it had during World War II or the Cold War. That's changed. When at the level of the man on the street or the woman on the street, they sense something with a very real, immediate, and durable impact, then you've got an entirely different situation. This reverberates around the country, not just in New York or Washington. There are hundreds of people who will have lost friends and relatives in California. Those planes were destined for San Francisco and Los Angeles. There are people across the country who will be immediately affected, and the symbolism of this is extraordinary. So I think the long-term impacts on policy are very great, and we will have crossed a watershed with these terrible assaults of this morning.
Professor Lieber, thank you very much for joining us from Washington.
Thank you.
And people are still being rescued from ruined buildings in New York. Here's the experience of some of the people caught up in the attacks.
The plaza we were on.
It was complete dark, there is no light. So thank God somebody with little light came up because we couldn't even see what's happening. We all, with dust and debris and...
How'd you get out?
Well, the firefighter, somebody with little light came eventually, and we were following him.
And go to.
What did you do? I'm sorry.
The police officer told everybody to form a human chain, and we held on to each other, and he flashed the light, and he directed us to Building 5, and we went out Building 5.
Did you see people bleeding, and what did you see?
Oh, everybody could see. You want blood? Here's blood. Everybody's bleeding. People are laying all over the floor. It's horrible. And I was there the first time, and this is twice.
Okay, we were standing in front of the Soho Grand Hotel, and the doorman, I went to fire alarm company, the doorman goes to me, wow, I never seen a plane flying so low. And we looked out at it, all of a sudden, boom, it seemed like it wasn't even real. And we came running over here closer to the place, and all of a sudden we saw the other explosion. I don't know. That's all I saw. I saw a couple of people jumping out of the other building. I seen 2 or 3 people jump out of the building.
Let's just briefly bring you up to date and see if we can run some of those latest pictures which are coming in from New York. We're told that yet another building has now collapsed at the south end of Manhattan near the World Trade Center. It was the 47-story Salomon Brothers building next to the World Trade Center. There are still fears that even more buildings could actually collapse. The White House is saying now that President Bush will address the nation tonight. No time has been given, but we understand the president is on his way back to the White House after having gone to Nebraska to Strategic Air Command, which was the command center where, in the event of war, it would be expected that the war would have been run by the president and his staff. And of course, many Americans are indeed comparing today's events to the Japanese surprise attack on Pearl Harbor 60 years ago. At that time, in 1941, President Roosevelt said it was a day which would live in infamy. For most Americans, today is not so different. From this BBC News 24 special programme, goodbye.
Did you know how easy it is to watch almost all your favourite BBC programmes with subtitles? From award-winning drama and comedy to films, sports coverage and the local and national news. You can find subtitles for all sorts of programmes on CFAX page 888. Or if you're a digital viewer, simply select subtitles from the menu. Log on to bbc.co.uk/info for more details.
Due to tonight's schedule changes, we were unable to bring you Murder Rooms. It will return to BBC1 next Tuesday at 8:30.
70% of our planet is covered by water, yet we know little about the seas around us. Now a new series takes you further out and deeper down to show you things that have never been seen before. The Blue Planet starts tomorrow at 9 on BBC1. Until now, we've only touched the surface.
This is BBC1. Now the BBC News with Peter Sissons. It's 10 o'clock.
Terrorists attack the heart of America with catastrophic loss of life. Hijacked planes smash into and destroy New York's tallest buildings. Both towers of the World Trade Center collapse with thousands trapped. Another plane explodes on the Pentagon, mocking America's defensive might. In the streets, panic and the certainty that casualties are horrendous. Tonight, Britain imposes drastic security measures as Blair condemns the terrorist barbarism. Good evening. America came under attack today from international terrorists on a scale that made it more an act of war. The centre of New York is still smouldering, with America's two tallest buildings in ruins. Terrorists also struck with remarkable ease at the heart of America's defence, the Pentagon. Also in Washington, other government buildings, symbols of American power, were emptied as the terror spread. Air traffic is paralysed. Coast to coast, all key installations are on high alert. And amid the nightmare, the only estimate of fatalities is that they could run into many thousands. Out of the blue, at 8:45 this morning, New York time, a hijacked airliner carrying dozens of passengers flew straight into the World Trade Center's North Tower with devastating effect. 18 minutes later, a second attack. Another hijacked jet struck the Trade Center's twin South Tower, exploding in a huge fireball. Next, it was the turn of Washington and the Pentagon, the nerve center of America's military. A third hijacked American airliner, again with dozens of passengers on board, deliberately flown into the side of the building. As panic spread on the streets, all civilian flights were grounded, New York Stock Exchange was suspended, and the White House was evacuated, along with thousands of personnel in other government buildings. Then, the unthinkable. The South Tower of the World Trade Center, the world's fourth tallest building, collapsed, followed minutes later by the center's second tower. The building, symbol of global trade and workplace for 50,000 people, reduced to rubble. No one knows how many have died. A fourth hijacked plane crashed later in Pennsylvania. 45 people were on board. There were no survivors. There's been a stunned reaction across America and around the world. Here, Tony Blair has called an emergency cabinet committee meeting and put Britain on a high state of alert. Our first report on the day that terrorism struck at the heart of the world's most powerful nation is from James Robbins.
It should have been a perfect day. But just before 9 o'clock, the pure blue sky over Manhattan was filling with smoke. A hijacked American airliner had just smashed into the North Tower of the World Trade Center. No one quite knew what had happened. Surely this must have been a terrible accident. But what happened next showed these were no accidents. A second hijacked airliner, a Boeing 767 with 92 people on board, is flying straight for the other tower. By now, many hundreds of people must already have been dead, and the unfolding disaster could be seen all around New York.
Another one. Taking a look.
Oh my God! Oh, Jesus! Oh my God! My own eye. Just went in. Must be a car. Oh my God! Another plane just went in.
At that time, there would have been about 10,000 people in each tower of the World Trade Center, many thousands more in the Wall Street financial district all around. Those who could were running for their lives.
It's just...
I was just standing here watching the World Trade Center after the first plane hit. I just saw a second plane come in from the south and hit the South Tower halfway between the bottom and the top of the tower. It's got to be a terrorist attack. I can't tell you anything more than that. I saw the plane hit the building.
When a big explosion happened, some guy came out, his skin was all off. I helped him out. This is him all over. There's people jumping out of windows. I've seen at least 14 people jumping out of windows. It's horrific. I can't believe this is happening.
We heard a big bang, and then we saw smoke coming out, and everybody started running out, and we saw the plane on the other side of the building, and there was smoke everywhere, and people are jumping out the windows. Over there, they're jumping out the windows, I guess because they're trying to save themselves. I don't know.
But it wasn't only New York and America's financial heart which was under attack. Now it was the nation's capital, too. In Washington, the Pentagon was hit, headquarters for the armed forces of the world's superpower. A third hijacked airliner, again with dozens on board, had been crashed with devastating results. By now, smoke was billowing around Capitol Hill, and the White House was being evacuated. People were talking of a new Pearl Harbor, someone declaring war on the United States. And back in New York, the nightmare was still far from over. Firefighters were in the basement of the World Trade Center, wondering if the building above was safe. The unthinkable was about to happen. The South Tower, all 110 stories, collapsed, and it was all live on American television.
Thanks very much.
Completely collapsed.
The whole side has collapsed?
The whole building has collapsed.
The whole building has collapsed?
The building has collapsed.
That's the southern tower you're talking about?
Exactly. The second building that we witnessed the airplane enter.
On the ground, emergency services hardly knew which way to turn. People still trapped in the second tower had seen it all and could only wave in desperation. But it was already too late for rescue. The second tower, representing America's trade and wealth, was about to go. The Twin Towers, which took 7 years to build, had been utterly destroyed in a single morning. The Manhattan skyline and countless lives devastated.
Do not go down on the ground. You will get trapped. You will get trapped. Don't go.
Pretty bad, so. Big boom. come down the steps, everything fine till we got to the basement, and then everything just fell in. I got trapped under there with another guy, crawled out, kept getting hit in the head, had bags rolled around. Finally, we clawed our way out over the rubble.
Yeah.
Come on down. We did all right.
All right, way to be, Tom. Let's go.
Even the bloodied felt incredibly lucky on this terrible day. And firefighters could embrace each other for a few moments before facing many more hours of trauma. As New York struggled to cope, to adapt to the clogging dust, the fallout of so much tragedy, more news was coming in, a fourth crashed airliner in Pittsburgh. And somehow American government seemed almost powerless amidst all this. The centers of that power had been evacuated, key congressional leaders taken to secret locations. The president himself whisked to a nuclear bunker in Nebraska, shaken but pledging somehow to find those who masterminded this day of mayhem and massacre.
Freedom itself was attacked this morning by a faceless coward, and freedom will be defended. I want to reassure the American people that the full resources of the federal government are working to assist local authorities to save lives and to help the victims of these attacks. Make no mistake, the United States will hunt down and punish those responsible for these cowardly acts.
Hours after the attacks, the United States, the whole world, is struggling to take it all in. There's really no more rescue the firemen can seriously attempt. It's now a question of salvage amid the wreckage, as others in New York try to establish how many men, women and children have been lost. A priest picks his way through the New York ruins. The World Trade Center has been reduced to the stumps of skyscrapers that once helped define one of the world's most vibrant cities, normally loud with life. An entire society feels itself violated by terror. James Robbins, BBC News.
Our New York business correspondent, Stephen Evans, was in the World Trade Center when the planes hit the towers. Stephen was telling a local New York television station what he'd seen when, during the interview, one of the towers collapsed behind him.
We had that big explosion from much, much lower. I don't know what on earth caused that. The thing that strikes me is, one, the terribleness of the incident, whatever the cause, and we don't go into politics, but whatever the cause, the terribleness, the hugeness of what's happened. So huge, in fact, that most of the people around simply can't understand what happened. People were just standing around, talking at each other, nodding their heads. Oh my God. We gotta go. We gotta go. We gotta go. Oh my God. We gotta go. Right, sorry, it's going down. It's going down. Don't worry, it's going down. It's going down. From here. But you need to shoot, so it's not like... Quick! Don't go into a building, there's no game. Right, come on, get this. We're good here.
And Stephen Evans joins us now in New York. Stephen, first, there's news that another building has collapsed. Can you confirm it?
I can't confirm that anything has collapsed, but all I can confirm is that all the buildings in that complex, that vast complex that normally employs 50,000 people, must be tottering. I think we can bring you pictures of the scene as it is now, and you will see dust everywhere. What strikes me about the pictures is that a lot of the emergency vehicles have got dust and debris on top of them, and that's because they arrived there very, very quickly indeed, and then new buildings collapsed, new devastation was caused. I don't think anybody really knew how that structure, nor could anybody know how those structures would react to an aircraft, two aircraft flying into them. So the thing now is that nobody quite knows what's underneath that debris.
How long did it take people to realise how serious the situation was, that the buildings were doomed? When you were down there when you heard the first impact, how long did it take people to catch on that they had to get out?
it took people, people immediately knew they had to get out. People immediately knew that there was something serious going on. But actually, you didn't know how serious. I didn't know how serious until, what are we now, 9 hours later. It is sinking in very, very slowly. One of the things, as I said, that happened was people got out and then simply stood at the base thinking, well, we've evacuated the building, therefore we're safe. And then literally hundreds of ambulances arrived on the scene, fire engines, whatever, and parked in that complex. One of the questions I think that will arise is how many people have died, if you like, in the aftermath of the accident. There is, if you like, a psychological aftermath to the accident as well. You might be able to see behind me Times Square, which is normally one of the busiest parts of this city. It is deserted now, partly because it's been closed off to traffic so that ambulances can get up and down this island, ferrying people wherever they need to be ferried. But also, people, I think, have gone home. It's a cliche in these events, if we've ever had an event like this one, that people are shocked and stunned. But they are. The few people who are down there are simply looking up at boards with the latest news and not saying very much indeed.
Stephen Evans, thank you. It may be at least 24 hours before there's any accurate estimate of how many have died in the attack, but the Mayor of New York said tonight the death toll would be more than any of us could bear. He also appealed for blood donations for the injured, who've been taken to 170 hospitals across New York.
Rescue workers overwhelmed by their task. For New York, this was a nightmare come true. The scale of the carnage remains unclear, but it's possible that many thousands of people may have been killed. It's still too dangerous for the authorities to search the rubble that was the World Trade Center. The National Guard has been sent in to relieve exhausted firemen. The hospitals are overwhelmed.
All right, well then let's go north then.
For a while, the city's mayor Giuliani was himself trapped in the emergency control center, which was close to the towers. Later, he said the city's hospitals had been coping with more than 2,000 injured, but it's clear there's much more bad news to come.
Good afternoon. The number of casualties will be more than any of us can bear ultimately, and I don't think we want to speculate on the number of casualties. The effort now has to be to save as many people as possible.
As survivors walked around dazed, no one could be sure how many did not escape before the towers collapsed. Some estimate as many as 20,000 could still have been inside. Across America tonight, families will be coming to terms with untold grief. Within a couple of hours of the attack, volunteers were queuing to give blood at this Red Cross centre after the city's hospitals reported a critical shortage. Red Cross shelters are also being set up, offering support to the injured and bereaved. In Washington, rescue workers tended to hundreds of defence staff. After the Boeing 757 had crashed into the Pentagon, there was an orderly evacuation from the rest of the building. But nearly 5 hours later, the flames were still too intense to allow rescue in some affected areas. Again, the death toll is uncertain.
I don't have any sense of scale at all. We know there are casualties. I can't give you a good number, and we're going to work to try to get that as quickly as I can, but we don't have it yet.
America is in shock. As well as the casualties on the ground, 266 died on board the 4 aircraft. But everyone knows that that is just the start. The full horror of what's been done to this resilient nation will take time to sink in. Neil Dixon, BBC News.
And I'm joined from Washington by our correspondent Tom Carver. Tom, what news from the seat of government tonight? Is the President back at the White House?
Not yet, no. He is flying back at the moment from an Air Force base in Nebraska, where within the last half hour he convened his National Security Council. He was on the phone. Dick Cheney was in the Situation Room underneath the White House with Condoleezza Rice, his National Security Advisor. A number of things came out of that. The National Guard in various places has been mobilized. The borders of America have been sealed, and forces around the world, American forces, are on the highest state of alert. Here in Washington, I should say that it really feels like the Capitol has been sealed off. Air Force One will be the only plane that will be allowed in here for the next 12 hours. Congress has been evacuated, so have all the federal buildings, and behind me here is the smoke from the Pentagon, which is still burning.
How is Congress and the Washington establishment reacting? What are they all saying the president should do? I gather he's going to broadcast later tonight. What has he got to say to satisfy them?
Well, the mood here, I would say, is a mixture of astonishment and anger. A number of congressmen are calling this a second Pearl Harbor and demanding immediate retaliation. I spoke within the last 20 minutes to an intelligence source, a senior member of the intelligence community, who said, we are at war at this particular moment in our history. Obviously, there are a lot of other people who are also calling for calm, but at the moment, that calm is not really being felt.
Tom Carver, thank you. Worldwide condemnation of the attacks has been swift, and so too have been the denials of guilt. Those responsible will have had money and resources that are available to only a few terrorist organizations, and the focus of the investigation into America's worst breach of security will inevitably fall on Islamic and extremist groups. As George Ekin reports, it will be those responsible for attacks on US interests around the world who will come under scrutiny.
The horror and carnage inflicted on the United States today is a cause of celebration. This was the Arab quarter of Jerusalem, where many showed their approval of a day of unprecedented terror in America's backyard. A claim of responsibility was reported from one Palestinian group, but then swiftly denied. The Palestinian leader condemned the attacks.
We are completely shocked, completely shocked. Unbelievable.
Investigators hunting the organisers will first consider these were airborne suicide missions on a scale not seen since the Second World War.
I think it's almost impossible to believe that a hijacker could convince an American domestic airline pilot to commit suicide by flying into the World Trade Center. I have absolutely no doubt at all they had trained pilots. We know in the past that they've had pilots who have been perfectly capable of flying aircraft, and this can only be the only, I think, answer to this. American pilots would not do this, but Arab fundamentalists may well be prepared to.
And it's this wealthy Arab fundamentalist that American officials are already naming as an immediate suspect, Osama bin Laden. He controls and finances Al-Qaeda, an umbrella network of Islamic militants, and he's vowed to destroy the United States. Bin Laden is accused of masterminding a string of attacks, including the US embassy bombings in East Africa 3 years ago, which killed more than 200 people. In retaliation, the Americans fired cruise missiles at training camps used by bin Laden in Afghanistan. They put a $5 million price on his head and led a worldwide crackdown on Al-Qaeda.
The Osama bin Laden...
Afghanistan's ruling Taliban, which continues to offer bin Laden sanctuary, insists he isn't capable of carrying out attacks like today's. But bin Laden is suspected of involvement in the last attack on the World Trade Center 8 years ago. 6 people died when a bomb exploded in an underground car park. His associate, Ramzi Youssef, was jailed for that, and for plotting to blow up a dozen American airliners over the Pacific, a plan which in some respects foreshadowed today's terror. While the possibility isn't being excluded, no one's suggesting that the devastation of such high-profile international targets like the Pentagon and the World Trade Center is domestic terrorism. The sophistication of today's attacks, with highly trained perpetrators and their synchronization to occur within 2 hours, point towards months, if not years, of preparation. Does all this mean then that a rogue state might be involved? Some experts are skeptical.
Countries have realized that as governments, their involvement in terrorism has cost them more than it's gained them. And so there are very few countries left who are in the real terrorism business. Obviously, some governments fund groups that may conduct terrorist acts, but that's very different than actually providing government support for it.
State condolences flood in, yet it seems highly unlikely, if not impossible, that the biggest and bloodiest terrorist operation ever could have been planned and prepared without a single government around the world even noticing. George Ekin, BBC News.
And we're joined now by our World Affairs editor, John Simpson, who's in Islamabad, and from Jerusalem by Orla Gearin. But John Simpson first. John, you've just been in Afghanistan across the border, where you spent the last week. Bin Laden is supposed to be holed up there. Has he, in your view, got the resources and the organisation to carry out an attack of this complexity?
Yes, I think he has. He's got, we know, the fanaticism, he's got the followers, he's got the money, and he's got, frankly, the imagination to do it. He has something like 2,000 men in training camps in Afghanistan. Most of them, perhaps almost all of them, Arabs from countries like Algeria, Saudi Arabia, from Egypt. The best ones are selected off, the others simply go and fight in Afghanistan's own war, but the best ones are given special training. There's a camp, it said, near Jalalabad, where people have heard gunfire in the mornings in particular, which may be one of those training camps. It's difficult to know. And he certainly does have the organization. After all, only 2 or 3 days ago now, 2 Arabs really using the cameras and so on, which were booby-trapped, managed to kill an extremely well-guarded figure of the Afghan opposition. They were traveling on Belgian passports, and I think the chances are that anybody who's operating in this part of the world will have easy access to passports, easy access to different forms of transportation right around the world, and they show their determination to do it.
John, if America wanted to go after bin Laden and his followers, they decided they were the target, how difficult would it be to hit at them?
Well, it's easy enough to hit at Afghanistan, and I do think it's important to draw the distinction between the Taliban government in Afghanistan, who are bin Laden's hosts, not perhaps all that willingly his hosts, and the man himself. I think it's frankly going to be extraordinarily difficult for the Americans to hit him. He's got his own peculiarly difficult and complex system of communications, which they simply can't break into. I think, frankly, they'll if they're going to attack, they decide that the attack has come from there, they'll hit Afghanistan very hard, they'll hit the hosts, but frankly, I doubt very much whether they'll get the guest.
John Simpson in Islamabad, thank you. Orla Gearin in Jerusalem. Who do the Israelis think did it?
Well, for the moment, for Israel, Osama bin Laden is also the prime suspect, although what intelligence experts are talking about here is not bin Laden alone. They're not convinced that he has the infrastructure and the capability to pull off such a sophisticated attack that was coordinated so precisely. So what they're talking about is bin Laden plus bin Laden operating with the support of another state, speculation focusing on Iran perhaps or Iraq, although so far there is no proof of that. But certainly the presumption here is that this is Islamic extremists outside of Israel rather than on the inside.
How do you square Mr. Arafat's condemnation of this atrocity with the jubilation we've seen on Palestinian streets?
Well, to be fair to Yasser Arafat, I think he seemed to be genuinely as stunned and flabbergasted as the rest of us by these events. Yes, we did see some celebrations taking place, and those scenes were quite horrific, but I think we have to put that in its context. We have not had mass spontaneous rejoicing across the West Bank and Gaza. In fact, most areas have been very quiet. I think the majority of Palestinians, like the majority of people everywhere, have been inside their houses, glued to their television sets, with increasing degrees of horror as they watch the events unfold. And I think that many Palestinians have been down on their hands and knees, praying that this is nothing to do with them and that they won't be asked to pay any price for it.
Orla Gearin in Jerusalem, thank you. Here, the Queen expressed her total shock at the terrorist outrages and sent her sympathy to President Bush. And the Prime Minister said Britain stood shoulder to shoulder with the United States in the fight against the terrorists. He announced that government and military buildings here had been placed on alert and that a series of measures were being imposed to step up aviation security across Britain's skies.
Here in Britain, a dramatic curtailing and rerouting of flights are among the measures agreed by the Prime Minister. Tony Blair spent more than an hour closeted with senior cabinet colleagues, officials and intelligence advisers.
We have stepped up security at airports to the highest levels. No flights will take off from the United Kingdom for which we cannot apply the highest standards of security for aircrew and passengers. Private flights have been stopped except where specifically authorized. Flight paths into London have been changed so there will be no civil overflights of central London. Security has been increased across the full range of government buildings and military premises.
But the bigger political question for Mr. Blair was how closely he wanted to associate Britain with the United States at a dangerous moment. There was no shred of doubt about that.
This mass terrorism is the new evil in our world. The people who perpetrate it have no regard whatever for the sanctity or value of human life. And we, the democracies of the world, must come together to defeat it and eradicate it. This is not a battle between the United States of America and terrorism, but between the free and democratic world and terrorism. We therefore here in Britain stand shoulder to shoulder with our American friends in this hour of tragedy. And we, like them, will not rest until this evil is driven from our world.
Domestic on hold as the attack broke. Mr. Blair aborted a major setback on his policies at the TUC conference in Brighton, opting instead for a brief, shocked statement before rushing back to London. While the outgoing Tory leader, William Hague, announced a 24-hour delay in the counting of votes for his successor.
In the light of these events and in consultation with the candidates for the party leadership and the returning officer, I have decided to cancel the party meeting that was scheduled to take place tomorrow to greet the new party leader as a mark of respect for those who have lost their lives.
The new opposition leader, Ken Clarke or Ian Duncan Smith, will now be revealed on Thursday. It's clear that these attacks mean more intrusive security in Britain and a closer interest in some of the dissident groups based here in London. But the bigger question tonight is just what Tony Blair means when he promises that the democracies will eradicate mass terrorism. The world's security system and Britain's place in that system are already changing shape tonight. Andrew Marr, BBC News, Westminster.
Today's attacks, which began with hijackings in Boston, will lead airlines around the world to review their security. Recent bombings in London mean that Britain is already on a heightened state of terrorist alert.
This evening, parts of the UK are on their highest security level for many years. Military activity at US bases here is visibly more intense. At British bases too, the security awareness level has been raised to amber, the second highest category there is. The raft of measures announced tonight will immediately affect our everyday lives, all because we're allies of America and are not immune to risk.
Since the end of the Cold War, the UK has very much shifted to wars that are conducted abroad, whether that's in West Africa, East Timor, or indeed in the Balkans. Wars of choice. What this indicates is that wars and conflict are not outside our own national territory, and that sometimes they come home and affect us, the individuals.
In response to events in America, the London Stock Exchange was evacuated, along with other prominent buildings. Elsewhere in the city, communications with the States failed. Workers could only watch in horror as events unfolded.
Yeah, you should be giving CR24 number to anyone who wants ongoing.
Control Risks advises businesses on how to minimise the risk of terrorist attack. Tonight, its message to increase security was taken up by thousands of private companies and by the government.
You're going to see all prestige buildings are going to be much more determined in their access control measures, in the movement of staff in and out of buildings. People who are travelling have got to expect they're going to meet a higher degree of checks than they've ever seen before.
All flights to the USA have been suspended indefinitely. More stringent checks have tonight been introduced at UK airports and security is being reviewed. It's already tougher than on domestic flights in America, where experts say airlines have resisted tighter, time-consuming precautions.
the domestic point has been known by anybody who knows anything as America's weakest point, and this has just proven it in the most horrific way possible.
In London, some police leave's been cancelled and hundreds of extra officers drafted in as the city's put on heightened alert. It's the same abroad. But even as Americans at embassies worldwide mourn the dead, the Foreign Office here warns there could be further atrocities and says British citizens travelling to Muslim countries should be particularly vigilant. Margaret Gilmore, BBC News.
The World Trade Center was among the world's most famous landmarks, a giant monument to the power of global business and the market economy. The complex was the size of a small city. Tens of thousands of people worked there. But its architects never imagined it would need to withstand the kind of attack seen today. Here's Fergus Walsh.
The Twin Towers of the World Trade Center dominated the skyline of Lower Manhattan. When the World Trade Center opened in 1973, they were briefly the tallest buildings in the world. They were also potent symbols of global commerce and world prosperity. Looking at these archive pictures, it's hard to believe they've been reduced to nothing more than rubble. They were quite simply enormous. Each tower was 1,350 feet tall, 110 stories high. The World Trade Center was the largest commercial complex in the world, effectively a mini-city. 50,000 people worked inside, 90,000 visited the building every day. 1,200 companies had offices there, including American Express, Salomon Brothers and Deutsche Bank. There were also scores of international trade organizations. Below ground was a huge shopping complex and even a subway station carrying thousands of people to and from the center. So how could this have happened within an hour of the impact, the towers collapsing to the ground? Unlike most conventional skyscrapers, the towers had no interior columns to give them strength. It was the exterior walls which bore most of the load, and so the direct attacks were enough to weaken them and make them topple. This image is like a scene from a Hollywood disaster movie, yet it was happening for real. Fergus Walsh, BBC News.
Within the last hour, the New York Stock Exchange has said it will be closed tomorrow. The effects of today's attacks are already being felt throughout world markets. I'm joined now by our business editor, Jeff Randall. Jeff, has a major financial centre ever taken a blow like this before?
No, I don't think so, Peter. It's inconceivable to think of anything like this happening around the world. I mean, since the Second World War, we've had some pretty horrible shocks. We've had the Korean War, the Vietnam War, the Falklands War, but this strikes right at the heart of the American financial system. I mean, these towers were in the area known as Wall Street. This is America's financial system being hit hard, and it's really brought home the full horrors of terrorism.
Will they be in any hurry to reopen?
No, I don't think so. We've said that they won't be opening tomorrow. I'd be amazed if they open within a week, frankly. It's not just a question of fixing broken systems. It's about human spirit and decency. I spoke to some people in American banks here today who have friends on Wall Street. They weren't concerned about markets or share prices. They wanted to know what had happened to their friends. Had they got out? Were they safe?
I suppose there must be some possibility that key Wall Street figures have been casualties.
I think it's almost inevitable with so many people in that building. We think there may be 10,000, 15,000 people in there this morning. At its peak, there would be 40,000. It's almost certain that some very senior figures will be involved.
Is it possible to say from past experience what major terrorist acts, and they don't come any bigger than this, can do to world markets, what economic damage they can do?
Well, it's not so much a question of terrorism, but just shocks. If we think back to 1974, when OPEC raised the price of oil, the world economy went into recession. During the Gulf War in the early 90s, soon after that, the world economy went into recession. With world markets so uncertain now and confidence so low, I can't see how this does anything other than real severe damage. And I'm afraid to say I do think this is a real threat to the world economy and could tip us into recession.
Jeff Randall, thank you. Well, now briefly some other news. A French court has rejected a bid by Eurotunnel for the immediate closure of the Sangatte refugee camp near Calais. The Channel Tunnel operator said it was being used as a base for attempts to enter Britain illegally on cross-channel trains and lorries.
Last night, like every night, the illegal immigrants were on the move, making the short walk from Sangatte to the tunnel entrance, biding their time, waiting for the right moment to make a jump for it. But this morning, unlike any other, Eurotunnel were taking the French government to court, demanding the immediate closure of the refugee centre.
The apparent passivity of the French government to act against the human traffickers who operate openly in the camp, creating the conditions that facilitate the passage of clandestines towards England, is worsening the condition.
Eurotunnel, who are spending millions on security and daily are trying to make the incursions more difficult, have vowed to appeal against today's court ruling. Arguing to keep Sangatte open, lawyers for the French government somewhat extraordinarily wondered in court why all the media fuss about a simple disused warehouse, and said that closing it would be no solution.
They will stay here.
If it's closed, if you lose, what will happen?
They will be in the street.
So Sangatte will remain open now that the legal avenues have failed. But tomorrow everything is due to move into the political arena when David Blunkett is scheduled to meet his French counterpart. All sides agree that there's a problem, but finding a solution is proving more elusive. John Sopel, BBC News, Sangatte.
The government's outlined details of new measures to try to prevent any fresh outbreaks of foot and mouth disease when animals are moved to lower ground in the colder weather. There will be a strict new system starting from next week where all livestock movements will be licensed and inspected. There'll also be tighter controls in high-risk counties. Glasgow Rangers Football Club has appealed against an order by UEFA, the governing body of European football, to play a match in the former Soviet Republic of Dagestan, which borders Chechnya. The club said they were concerned about their safety. UEFA says the match should go ahead as planned. Two English clubs are playing in Champions League matches tonight. Liverpool had to settle for a 1-1 draw against the Portuguese side Boa Vista. Michael Owen scored the equaliser in the first half. And Arsenal were beaten 1-0 by Real Mallorca, who earned a penalty when Ashley Cole was sent off in the 11th minute. And now more on the impact of today's attacks in America. I'm joined in the studio by James Robbins and in Downing Street by Andrew Marr. But James first, when America gets its act together, what's it going to do?
I think it is certain that there will be retaliation, I think massive retaliation, because after all, we've seen the precedent of America going after Osama bin Laden before, after the attacks on the American embassies in Africa. That attempt was unsuccessful. They launched some 70 Tomahawk cruise missiles from the ocean towards his camps in Afghanistan, but he himself escaped. Clearly, after an outrage on a much larger scale, they are not going to do nothing. They are going to act and act toughly. And I think the implications for the Middle East are frankly daunting.
Will heads roll in America's intelligence community who did not see this coming?
I think that's also a very distinct possibility. I mean, it is extraordinary that both the CIA and the FBI failed to detect the threat and failed to prevent 4 separate, concerted, synchronized attacks, successful hijacks of American domestic aircraft, and then they were piloted with deadly accuracy onto these most important of targets. It's very hard to believe that America's intelligence establishment can escape the blame.
James Robbins, thank you. Andrew, a very comprehensive list from number 10 of security measures. Do ministers fear that this threat now could come here?
Well, it's certainly possible, and Tony Blair has gone out of his way to associate Britain with America at this moment. He's been spending the time since that meeting with other ministers and officials speaking to other, mainly European leaders. He's spoken to Chancellor Gerhard Schroeder, to President Chirac, to Mr. Jospin, and indeed to President Putin in Russia. And part of the reason for that is not simply to explain that there is solidarity with America, but also to make it clear that the world should act together, democracy should act together. And I think there is a real sense in London of anxiety and worry about what the Americans in their agony might do. And a sense that there has to be, if you like, a grand alliance of cool heads, friends of America, to try internationalize this. Because, of course, there are American responses which could make this awful situation even worse.
You pointed up earlier Mr. Blair's use of the word eradicate of terrorism. We've had our fair share of terrorism from Lockerbie to Enniskillen and Warrington and Omagh. Could this have any lasting effects on the way this administration combats it?
Well, I think security everywhere gets tighter, if you like, even more paranoid at moments. I think it makes life for people travelling through airports harder, all that kind of thing. But, you know, it's very, very easy to talk about combating terrorism, eradicating terrorism. The Americans have been trying to get Osama bin Laden, as James Robbins was pointing out, for a very long time, and they've failed for a very long time. And the danger is that some overwhelming response is produced by America, which inflames an already awfully dangerous situation even further. And I think that is one of the things that Tony Blair is trying very, very hard in his quiet way to stop tonight.
So how long will these emergency measures, how long does the War Cabinet, if that's what it is, intend these emergency measures to last?
Well, quite a long time, I think. There's another meeting at 8 o'clock tomorrow evening. There are a lot of issues about the long-term security of airports and so on. I don't think this crisis situation is going to lift from Britain or anywhere else for quite a while to come.
Andrew Marr, thank you. And we've just received some pictures which we haven't seen before of the moment that the aircraft hit the World Trade Center, the second tower. A different angle, a different perspective on the horror. Well, Newsnight's continuing now on BBC2, but that's all from this special edition of the 10 o'clock news on Tuesday, the 11th of September 2001. The day that America was stunned by the deadliest attack that terrorists have yet devised. Just before 9 o'clock in the morning, a hijacked plane crashed into the World Trade Center in New York, where thousands of people work. Just minutes later, there was another attack. Television viewers across the world watched as a second passenger airline was deliberately flown straight into the Twin Tower and exploded in a ball of flames. As America reeled from the impact in New York, a third hijacked plane, again with dozens of passengers on board, struck a wing of the Pentagon in Washington. A fourth hijacked plane crashed later in Pennsylvania. There were no survivors among the 45 people on board. Today will change Americans, and it could change the world, because it was the day that terrorism declared war by claiming not scores, but thousands of victims. And by comparing it to Pearl Harbor, Americans grieving, shocked, and angry have served notice that they now expect their democracy to carry the war to the enemy that so despises it. From the 10 o'clock news, good night.
Welcome to the programme. Tonight, London is on high security alert. A no-fly zone has been imposed in the skies above our city. The Met's Police Commissioner says he wants tomorrow to be business as usual. But some officers have had their leave cancelled and others have been taken off training to increase the force by 500. We'll have a full interview with the Commissioner later in the bulletin. But first, Michael Graves-Andy on how London reacted to today's terrible events.
Have you seen that? What? Have you seen that?
Tonight, a sense of anger and outrage steadily replaced the disbelief after today's terrorist assault.
My flight was supposed to be at 6 o'clock heading back home to Boston. I just was watching, well, obviously it was canceled for 48 hours, and I thought my wife was on the plane. Tragic.
Many workers abandoned their offices and sought out television screens to watch events unfold.
Just trying to get a grasp on how many people work in those buildings. I mean, I don't know how tall they are, but there's a lot of people and they could not have got out, so that's
I can't say anything about it. I'm just in total shock.
Standing! With people eager to find out the latest news on a terrorist attack, evening newspapers in the capital sold out in minutes of being delivered to newsstands.
Every bundle that's come along, we've sold out, and now they're trying to get more.
London and New York are often said to be sister cities, and tonight, judging by how shocked and devastated people in the capital are, it will take some time before a sense of normality returns. Michael Graves-Andy, Newsroom South East in central London.
Earlier, our Home Affairs correspondent Penny Root spoke to the Metropolitan Police Commissioner Sir John Stevens. He told her how his flight to New York today was abandoned.
We were about 2 hours across the Atlantic and had to fly back with a little bit of scare with people on the plane, and obviously some of the people on the plane had relatives in New York.
So a lot of anxiety on that plane. Perhaps ironically, you were on your way to America to discuss security issues and terrorism with the FBI.
That's absolutely right. We're going to New York and to see the commissioner there and also the mayor of New York, and then down to Washington where we're going to have a meeting with British police chiefs and also the new head of the FBI, which has been arranged through the British Embassy.
Since you've returned, you've spoken with Ken Livingstone about security measures in London. What are you doing specific in London to increase security?
Well, we're getting far more resources into London, specifically, of course, for Heathrow, but we're also ensuring that tomorrow that we can hopefully get business as usual for Londoners.
Is there any intelligence to suggest that London could be a target?
No, not as yet, but of course what we are doing, we're working very closely with the security services, working extremely closely with our American colleagues and others, and should there be any warnings, we will let people know. But at the moment, business as usual, and everything will be done by the security services of this capital to ensure that people can be as safe as they possibly can in these circumstances.
Well, much of the focus today has been on the American Embassy, where people have flocked desperate for information. Our political editor, John Craig, is there now. John.
Well, Gillian, as you'd expect today, there's been a lot of contact between the Embassy here and 10 Downing Street as events have unfolded. As you can see behind me this evening, there's a candlelit vigil by American people who are visiting London. Some of them say they live only 3 blocks away from the World Trade Center.
The Greater London Authority will be meeting with Ken Livingstone tomorrow. What will be on the agenda?
Special meeting tomorrow, a very sorrowful meeting, no doubt. It's going to be a minute's silence. Ken Livingstone doesn't normally attend these assembly meetings. He will tomorrow give his first public response, talk about how he plans to take emergency measures. He's been in touch with Mayor Giuliano of New York. Bob Kiley, the New Yorker who runs the Tube, of course, he's in a state of shock. He used to have an office in the World Trade Center.
John, thank you. Now, the latest travel information on the Tube. The Piccadilly line will run a special shuttle service through the night between Heathrow and Hammersmith. There are extra trains between Stansted and Liverpool Street. At the airports, all flights to and from the US are suspended. Also, passengers taking any transatlantic flights from Heathrow, Gatwick and Stansted are being advised to check with their airlines before leaving home. City and Luton airports are operating normally. The latest information is on our London Live website. Also on our website, a condolence book has been opened and message boards are up and running. There's special programming on the London Live 94.9, and that's until 1 a.m. For the moment, good evening.